I know you think you know how to hustle, but this is a big crime, stealing these people's money. If you keep it, you'll have to become somebody else. And it's not what you think it is. You cannot get off on that foot in this life.
MadMen, the milk and honey route. Well, folks, this is it. The second to last episode. Had a lot of emotions going into this one, and I thought for today, just try something a little bit different, maybe film outside. It's just gorgeous out today. I didn't get a chance to film last night. Actually ended up watching the finale of Revenge last night. That's another show I'll be talking about soon. And this morning it was just so gorgeous I thought I'd come sit outside. We're opening this in about a week, and I'll tell you, I can't wait. So for right now, a couple good scenes with Dawn falling into or next to swimming pools too, aren't there? So I thought it might be appropriate. So, you know, first we saw Dawn looking at his lonely apartment. Lights were off, he turned, you know, and he's just looking at it, he's all alone. Next we saw him standing in the middle of his completely cleared out apartment. Next we saw him locked out of his apartment, actually sitting, standing outside, because now it's sold. So now he's outside, and I think I made the joke. The next thing we're going to see is him actually sitting out on the street corner, and he's homeless or something like that. And we didn't get too far from that this week, did he? That image of him sitting on the bus stop. Now he's given away his car. He has probably not too much money left. He has no apartment. He has no job. He's quit. He has no life. His kids don't really need him. I mean, he does have a relationship with Sally now that seems to be friendly, but I wasn't too far off, was I? He's actually sitting outside on a bus stop, and they just keep pushing him further and further away from the trappings of his life as Don Draper and that world that he used to think was so important. Because what is happiness? It's a moment before you need more happiness. So, the fact that next week, you know, the show is over. There's no 8th season. There's no spin-off. There's no movie. The story ends. It is difficult to accept. I know we've grown to know these characters, you know, for about 8 years, and we've welcomed them into our homes. I don't know about you, but you know, life for me has completely changed in the last 8 years. And when I look back at the journey these characters have taken in my personal journey, it's really interesting to look back on and to look at the choices that they've made, the choices that I'm sure, you know, you and I have made. And some of them have been great, some of them have maybe not been so great. But that's the path, and there's no point looking back. So, you know, I always had the feeling that the show could go on for 10 years or more. I mean, the writing's been so great, the characters, the actors, the accolades. The ratings have never been super for Mad Men, but they've held strong. And, you know, like we all think we're going to live to be 110. We don't want to think that something could end. We don't want to think that the show could end. But it is, next week, this coming Sunday. That'll be it, and it's not a 2-hour special like I thought it should have been. We're only getting an hour, so that's 40 precious minutes left with these characters. And you know, before we get too much into the meat of this episode, I just want to say, the last hour could be just Dawn, and I think we'd all be satisfied. I know I would be. I mean, Peggy, Roger, Joan, Betty at this point, I mean, their stories have all come to an end. I think the shot of Peggy walking into McCann, like we talked about last week, that could be the last that we see of her, and that's the end of her story. She went from this meek, mild-mannered secretary, very nervous, not sure of her own abilities, and she has grown into a self-assured career woman at the top of her industry, well respected by her peers, and she's going to McCann. And is she going to succeed there or not? I think we all think she's going to succeed, but I don't think we need a scene this coming Sunday with her at her desk and, you know, I don't know. If they do something like that, it might be just like a charming coda, but I don't think we need it. I think her story's ended. I think Roger, I think we know basically he's going to just fade into retirement. Joan, we know, has something with Richard. Does it work out or not? It doesn't matter. She's following her own path, and she's doing what she wants to do. She held true to herself. She didn't take Bob Benson's offer. But anyway, I think basically what I'm saying is next week could be just 40 minutes of Dawn. I think I'd be happy. I think I'd prefer that to them trying to squeeze in a quick scene with every single character in the last 40 minutes. So, the show opens with Dawn getting pulled over by the cops, and they say, you know, we finally caught up with you. And then it cuts to him in bed. And I thought Matthew Weiner was going to pull a fast one and say at the bottom, like, 2 days earlier. And now we have to think, okay, now how does he get to that point? Where is he going? But it seems like it was just a bad dream. But what is he really afraid of? I mean, if they uncover his identity theft, I mean, it's so what? I mean, would he do time in jail for that? I mean, I guess that's fraud, but I'm not sure what he's so scared of, and how would they prove it? It seems like he's got the Social Security card and everything. Like, how could they really prove that that's not him? The only person that knew him was Anna, and she has passed away. So it's probably just, you know, his inner anxiety just about the whole thing. What is he running from? What is he running to? That's the central question of the series, but particularly this episode. So he's talking to Sally on the phone. They're having a great conversation. I thought after last week when he blew her off, when she blew him off for the ride to school, that she was mad at him. But it seems like they've made up and they're talking nicely. And the way he's talking, it seems like this journey he's taking is very open-ended. It seems like if you kind of draw what he's saying on a map, he's not really headed in one particular direction. He's kind of going around in circles a little bit. He went to the Grand Canyon. He's in Wyoming now, or he's heading to the Grand Canyon. He saw the two-headed cow in Wyoming, which is apparently, it was a real tourist attraction at the time. And, you know, we knew the minute he walked out of that meeting, he was done working. He was done with advertising. When he had that roast beef sandwich in the little box, I just love that image. You know, he was done with McCann, done with advertising, and he's done with New York probably as well. Will Betty's news bring him back to New York? I think that's one thing that we'll find out this week, this Sunday. So, you know, the farewell we had with the beers a few weeks ago, when it was Roger and Joan and Ted and Pete and Don. Am I forgetting anyone? And they were drinking the beers, and Sterling Cooper was dead, and they were moving to McCann. That really was the farewell. That was, like I was afraid it would be, the last time we see those characters actually together. So I was afraid of that, but it seems like that is what has come to pass. So Don walked out of the meeting and Ted smiles, and I thought it was sort of just like a wry smile, like, oh, there goes Don Draper again with his antics. But I think he smiled because Ted feels that Don has finally realized that Ted was right all along, that, you know, the responsibility in this job, it's just not worth it. Now Ted's just sleepwalking through it. He's putting in half an effort. He's putting in the minimum effort to not get fired because he doesn't care anymore. And Don has finally let go. And he says, I don't need this anymore, just like Ted did. So that big speech he gave at the end of Waterloo, where he talked Ted into, you need the work, Don was wrong. And Ted knows that Don realized that finally. I think that's what that smile was as he walked out of the room last week. So Ted is more than comfortable sitting through meetings like that and just kind of half-assing it. So the caddy breaks down somewhere in Oklahoma, and he's stuck at a motel while it's fixed. So when he meets the owner's wife, I just couldn't help but thinking if she was a couple years younger and brunette, we'd have a very different story on our hands. And but no, she's a little too old for him, so he passes the time reading books. He's reading The Godfather. At one point, a story we all know is, among other things, teaches us that a man that doesn't spend time with his family can never be a real man. And Don does have 2 sons at home who are going to need him more than ever once we get to the Betty section. So the scene later, he goes to the pool, which the young, how do I describe that man? The jack of all trades around the motel, who's running a couple different black market scams, the least of which is bringing alcohol to Don. Says that the pool has apparently had all of the piss chlorined out, which is great. So Don gives the male gaze to this girl, this woman at the pool, and the camera goes down her whole body. And now you're thinking that the episode's going to be about Don chasing her, but I think he's getting rid of that particular Don Draper trapping as well. I mean, it seemed like she had a family there, but that's not what he's there to do. That's not why he's there. He doesn't need that. I think he's finally realized, like Tyler Durden taught us, that maybe another woman is not the answer he needs. So she was actually reading The Woman of Rome. And it's funny. I was watching this show with my father-in-law, and as it showed the girl in the bikini, he said to me, because I just noticed that Don was reading The Godfather, and he said, "Okay, what book was she reading?" And I said, "The Woman of Rome." And he just looked at me. He said, "You were supposed to say what book?" But I did notice the title of the book, because I watch out for these things. And that is a story. I wasn't familiar with it. It was a movie as well. But that's it's another story of like an existential dilemma and disillusionment with the truth and with reality. So it's definitely, I think, Weiner obviously puts these things in very deliberately, and there's probably a lot of meaning there. I may take a look at that book this summer. So, it's always good to give extra meaning to the thought process. It informs the way we watch the show, but also it sort of informs the writer's process that Matthew Weiner's gone through to create these characters in this world. Obviously, he does a lot of world building, and these books that he puts in are definitely a big part of that. So, he seems to have some kind of a catharsis later on. He goes to like the VFW meeting and talking about his CO, which of course we know was the real Don Draper. And he says he killed him. And it's funny, when I remember that scene, I thought that they got bombed. I didn't think he dropped his lighter, but I got to go back and watch it. I thought that they were attacked by the enemy, but I guess that is how it happened. And I was reading some message boards, and there's some speculation that perhaps Don did it on purpose. Subconsciously, he dropped the lighter because he wanted a fresh start, but Don's not a murderer. I don't think he did it on purpose. I don't buy that particular explanation. What do you think? Leave me a comment after you hit subscribe. So, the scene at the VFW was great. It was a real who's who. There's a lot of actors there, and I know my father-in-law and I, we had fun kind of guessing who was who. Of course, I recognized Roy from The Office immediately. At first, I thought it was Chris Pratt because his performance on Parks and Rec. I know he has kind of a similar build to Roy from The Office, but also I just watched Guardians of the Galaxy like 3 times this week, so I've got Chris Pratt on the brain. Great movie, by the way. I'm off topic. So, as they tell stories, especially the guy who we recognize from Barney Miller, who apparently ate 3 skinny Germans. That's pretty horrifying. Just to stay alive, we learn a little bit about like the harsh sort of animality simmering below the the genteel exterior of these people. These people who seem like the salt of the earth, good guys. They're veterans. The atrocities and the things that they had to see and participate in. War is hell. I didn't personally serve, but I know people who have, and it's not pretty. And some of these stories that you hear of, it's a wonder sometimes these veterans, like we see portrayed in this show, that they can get by with some of those memories. But I give them all the credit for being able to do it. Don really didn't want to talk about Korea, and when the other Korean vet came up and said, show me your face, we all had that moment where we thought he was going to say, "You're not Don Draper. I knew Don Draper. Who the hell are you?" But in reality, he served much later and didn't know him, but he was just looking for some kind of a connection with another Korean vet. He was one of the younger guys there. So, the scene where the girl jumps out of the cake was pretty hilarious, and everyone's like, "Yeah," and Don's just like, "Wow, you guys got to get out more." So we see more of that harsh animality that I spoke about later when they drunkenly break into his motel room and beat the hell out of him with a phone book because they think that he stole the $500. And you've got to really ask yourself, why? What do they think Don's plan was there? The owner of the motel basically begged him to stay another day. He had no idea that there was a fundraiser, so that wasn't his plan all along. I mean, he obviously drives a Cadillac and he's got plenty of money to throw around, so why he doesn't need their spare change or their pocket change the way he put it. So what, I mean, I know they're drunk, they weren't thinking straight, but what sense would it really make for him to take that money? And then, okay, let's play devil's advocate. Let's say he did take the money. His plan was to steal the money and then go back to the hotel and go to sleep? Why wouldn't he get in his fixed car and hightail it out of there if that was his grand plan all along? It just makes no sense, but they were drunk, so we'll give him a pass. So the next day, Don immediately knows that it was sort of the grifter. I guess we'll just call him that because I don't remember his name. And he did take the money, and his plan was to hightail out of town and change his name. And in perhaps the scene that sort of had the most weight for me, Don says, if you keep the money, you've got to change your name and you can never come back here. And he says, it's not what you think it is. And what he means by that is taking the money, running away, and changing your name is not the answer to whatever problem this young man thinks he has. It's not the answer he thinks it will be. So he actually kind of gets through to him. The kid actually goes and gets the money, brings it back to Don. Don throws it on the counter, doesn't even implicate the kid. So I think that Don leaves, and those motel owners think that he did do it, and he gave it back. So they give him back his car keys, and it made sense to those drunk vets that was his plan all along. So we'll get back to Don in a minute. I want to talk for a second about Duck and Pete. It was great to see Duck again. I always liked Duck. Even when he was hateable, like when he let Chauncey just run out into the streets of Manhattan, that was horrible. But I did like Duck. You got to feel bad for him. St. John just browbeats him into drinking again. St. John knows he has a problem with alcohol, and he's forcing martinis down his throat. I'm trying to remember what name of that episode. What was the name of that episode? Mountain King, maybe? I'm not sure. I think it was the Mountain King. So, they had mentioned before that he was a professional headhunter, but I don't personally remember that. It was definitely made very clear in this one. And, all the credit goes to Mark Moses, who played him tonight with just enough, winking desperation, I think I'll call it, where, I almost expected him to take a page out of the book of Shelley the Machine Levine and make a call, talk to his fake secretary in the background, on the phone, do I have any time there? Oh, yes, you do. Great movie if you haven't seen Glengarry Glen Ross, just to really learn about salespeople and what they go through. So if you watch my Homeland reviews, shameless plug, I definitely loved his arc as the desperate husband of the ambassador to Pakistan. He was wonderful in Homeland, and it's one of those times where I'm looking at him, and I don't know, he just seemed shorter and a little heavier in that role to me for some reason. And in Mad Men, he always seemed kind of tall, but one of those things, like at the VFW hall tonight, where you're watching it, and I'm watching Homeland, and I'm like, who is the husband of the ambassador? Who is that guy? I know who he is. I just can't put my finger on it, and I found out it was Tuck Phillips from Mad Men. That was great. Really great actor, and he pulls off that role beautifully. Great acting by him tonight. Just enough desperation, just enough confidence. He's apparently like the kingmaker of New York, but he himself barely has enough to get through winter, like he phrases it. Why can't he get himself one of these jobs? That's what I want to know. His plan is to lead Pete, whose stock is apparently quite up right now, into the promised land at Learjet. And he's going to get him the best job ever, I guess $100,000 a year, which at that time was just outrageous. I'm not sure if I heard that correctly. They were at the verge at this time of introducing the Learjet, I think 356, and they're ready to, if you'll pardon the pun, really take off. So this is Pete's opportunity to move to Wichita and get a fresh start. So he goes to Trudy and basically says, I want you back. I want to be in Tammy's life. This is a fresh start for us. We're going to have our own private plane. We're going to buy a mansion. We can go wherever we want together as a family. Please let's the three of us have dinner. And she says, this is what I wanted you to say 2 years ago. But apparently it's not too late, because she says yes. And I really hope that Trudy meets him for dinner. And the three of them, I think that, again, like I said before, this could be the end of Pete's story. We don't need to see Pete this coming Sunday. That's a happy ending for him, which arguable that he deserves it. Reading back, I think I too have glossed over some of the sins that he committed. He's done some pretty bad stuff over the years, but people grow, people change, and I think people deserve a second chance. So he learned his lesson, and he did the right thing. He came back to his wife and his daughter and says, just give me another chance. He says, I've only ever loved you. And I think he believes it. This whole show has always been looking for more. What's next? What's more? He's not happy with what he has, and he finally learned that there's nothing more. What he had all along is all he needed. And that's a lesson that Don's having a hard time learning. He always thinks there's something else, there's something more, and he's not happy with what he has. He's always looking for some he's having an existential crisis that's lasted half his life. So we're going to see what he does with it. That's the conversation that I think he tried to have with Betty. Just let me come back home, but obviously he didn't do it soon enough. He didn't stay with it enough, and it just didn't work out for him. But now with Betty being sick, is he gonna? That's sort of like the central question I have: is Henry gonna raise those kids, and Don is off with a new identity, or is Don gonna come back to New York and actually help raise his sons and be there for Sally, which is what he should do? He can't run away and start over again. He's got too much to live for at home, especially now with Betty. I don't want to say gone, but you know what I mean. So in the fourth episode of the series, it was called New Amsterdam, Roger explains to Pete that Don thought he deserved another chance. And Pete was going to be fired. I forget what it was for, but he was going to be fired. And Roger said, Don wanted you to have another chance. So now he's your CO. You do whatever he says. And then he says to Don, I won't let you down, Don. And Roger says, oh, Jesus, don't say that. But all the way back in the fourth episode, we talked about Don giving Pete a second chance. So now he finally got it. And as Pete, talks his brother out of making the same mistakes that he was making, he just says, again, like Don says, this that you're going to go do tonight, it's not what you think it is. It's not the answer that you think it's going to be. Go home to your family. And he listens to Pete. I think he knows that Pete has been there, and he has a chance to make things right. So now he can stop making the same mistakes that his brother made. So I really respected that. Oh, Betty. As a counterpoint, to the hope and rebirth in the Pete storyline, we have Betty. And now she's in school, and she seems so happy. She seems like 10 years older than everyone else, but she's so happy, and she's running to class, and she is, she trips, and she falls down, she breaks her rib, and obviously they go take the x-ray, and they find a spot on her lung, and you know immediately what it is. Even before Henry takes the pack of cigarettes and crumples it up and throws it, you know immediately that it's lung cancer. And on Mother's Day, no less. Did they do that on purpose? Ugh, I'd like to think that was a coincidence. If not, it's pretty harsh. So Betty is taking the news with the strength in the class that you would expect. She's at her best now. She's not being whiny or petulant or childish like she's been in the past. She's taking this like an adult, like a matriarch, like a mother. And she's doing what she needs to do for her kids. She's trying to put her affairs in order. She's giving Sally the instructions. A little bit of vanity. She obviously wants to look her best when she's gone. And when she gives Sally that letter, and then Sally, there were two kind of heartbreaking scenes. When Sally reads the letter and when Henry breaks down in Sally's dorm room. Because, Henry's going through all 5 stages of grief. He's bargaining, he's angry, he's sad. And it's going to take a while to get to acceptance when you lose. She's got to be, late 30s? Mid 30s to lose someone like that. And now he thinks he can't count on Don. Now, Kenny, we'll find out next week. But he thinks now he's got to raise these 2 boys all by himself. And he's got a political career. He's going to have to get a full-time nanny or something like that. And is that really what's best for the kids? So, Henry is the stand-up guy we always knew he would be. And, maybe Don hears this news, he comes back and does what's right and helps raise his sons, helps Henry. You've got to really think that the money Don has that he's throwing away, the Cadillac and the $1 million to Megan, and he's just all the money he left behind at McCann, he's not doing what's right. He's not being a very good father. He could put that money in some kind of a trust for Gene and Bobby and make sure that they're taken care of. But instead, he's selfishly throwing it away on his existential crisis of identity. And I just really hope that he's secured their future. I know that Henry can do enough to secure their safety and their health, but he could pay for their college. He could pay to get them whatever they want. And either if you look at I'm just kind of thinking it through now. This is not in my notes, but if you think about the upbringing he had nothing. And he turned out, you could argue, okay. You could also you could also argue he turned out a very deeply flawed individual. But maybe he doesn't want Bobby and Jean to grow up with just piles of money and no character. Maybe he wants them to learn the value of hard work, but still he could put the money in a trust. Stop giving Cadillacs away to strangers. You know, it seems like he's done more for that kid who stole the money than he's done for his own sons lately. They obviously don't have the treatments for cancer in 1970, October of 1970, by the way, that they do in 2015. But you've got to really think that, you know, Betty, she's not giving up, she's not being selfish or childish. She just knows what's worth fighting for, and she knows when there's a fight and when there's not, and she is taking this with a lot of grace and class. Like I said before, you know, she knows just sometimes the lights go out, and it's like Pete eating that pie, and the lights go off, and Don's watching Flip Wilson, and the TV just goes off kind of unexpectedly. Sometimes the journey ends, and we don't have any say in the matter, and it's scary. She knows the battle's not winnable. I mean, after all, she learned, you know, some of these lessons being married to Don Draper for so long. So Don reminds us that, you know, he's very handy at fixing everything. So why can't he fix himself? We've seen before, you know, about as the season has progressed, that he has progressively lost everything. And, you know, we saw him lose Megan, his furniture, his company. He lost, you know, his importance at work. He became a cog in this giant machine. He was no longer the beautiful, unique snowflake Don Draper. And now he's given away his car. Why? What is his plan if it's not to shed every trapping of the creation of Don Draper and either reclaim Dick Whitman or start again with a third identity? So that's sort of the branching path before Don. Does he come back to New York, accept his responsibility, help raise his sons, and take care of Sally? Does he reclaim Dick Whitman? Go to California, maybe help raise Anna's niece, was it? I don't know, maybe go out there and be with her. Or does he completely start over, new identity, leave everything behind, and no one ever hears from him again? I really hope it's, whether he takes up the mantle of Dick Whitman or not, I really hope that he does come back to New York and does what's right and helps raise his sons. So, you know, he told the kid, it's not what you think it is. So, you know, running away and changing your name. So I really don't think he's going to do that. I think he's learned that lesson, and he's not going to make the same mistake twice on that one. It's not the answer that Don needs right now. He needs to fix himself. He needs to get whatever this is out of his system and come back to New York. So, you know, don't waste this, he tells the kid as he drives off with the Cadillac. He's got a chance. He's got an opportunity to go somewhere and get a job and just make a life for himself. He has a chance to not make the same mistakes that Don's made. So take it. What was the line at the end of Saving Private Ryan? Earn this, right? That's what the kid needs to do. He needs to earn it. Earn that Cadillac. So, you know, Don hands his advice to the next generation. Betty prepares Sally for what comes next, making sure that she's prepared and prepped to become an adult, basically. That's what stands before her. PFC Dinkins told Don, dying doesn't make you whole. You should see what you look like. Death is not the answer for Don Draper, and it never was. So, we've ruled out death. We've ruled out running away and starting again. So I think next week we see him find some sort of truth out on the road, and it ends with him coming back to New York to be with his sons. That's my guess, that's my hope, but with Don Draper, you never do know. So next week, person to person. Should have been 2 hours, give us a little more time with these characters. You know, please don't end. I wish this show wasn't ending. I've had a lot of fun talking about it with you, and it's been a lot of fun kind of analyzing it and reading some of your comments. So, as Buddy Holly said, every day it's a getting closer. Right now it's Tuesday morning. I didn't get to the video yesterday, so we've only got 5 days until the end. So, we'll see you next week for Person to Person and the MadMen finale. Thank you very much.